I worked the overnight shift at the grocery store just off Highway 19 for a few months. It was one of those places that barely saw anyone after midnight. A fluorescent box of aisles humming with fridges and freezers, flickering lights, and the occasional wanderer too drunk or too lost to find home. Most nights were uneventful, just me stacking shelves, checking expiration dates, and trying not to fall asleep while the hum of the coolers pressed against my ears like white noise. The further into the night it got, the heavier the quiet became, almost like the air itself wanted to watch and wait. That night, I was finishing a restock in the dairy section. Around 3 a.m., I passed the walk-in freezer to grab more cartons of milk. That's when I saw him. I froze. At first, I thought it was a reflection. Maybe one of the security cameras catching the shape wrong. But no, there he was, standing dead still, just inside the freezer. Pale face, dark, hollow eyes that didn't blink. No jacket, just standing there, staring at the back wall like he was waiting for something. My stomach went tight. I didn't move for what felt like forever, peering through the tiny window in the door. My hands went clammy, the fluorescent light above the freezer buzzing in a way that made my teeth ache. Finally, I forced myself to open the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would echo in the metal walls. The freezer was empty. The air inside burned my lungs, a cold that seemed to crawl into my chest, and frost swirled in little eddies across the bright tiles. Nothing. I stepped inside and shined my flashlight around. No one. I slammed the door shut and leaned against it, shaking. Maybe I'd been seeing things. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe the flickering light had made a shadow look human. I tried to convince myself of that, but deep down I knew it wasn't right. I continued my restock, still on edge. That's when I noticed the footprints. Wet, glistening prints trailing out of the freezer and down aisle 7, disappearing halfway along the floor. They weren't mine. I'd been careful to keep my shoes dry. I followed them with my eyes, heart thudding, but there was no one there. The cameras didn't show a thing. I checked the feeds on the monitor, rewinding, fast-forwarding, but each time, the aisle was empty. Nothing moved. Nothing appeared. I felt a cold weight in my chest, a creeping dread that refused to let go. Later, when I mentioned it to my manager, he chuckled, brushing it off like I'd been imagining things. But then he added something that made my stomach knot. The store was built over the remains of a diner that had burned down in the 70s. People had disappeared there, a few who never left, whose bodies were never found, though the fire had been massive. He didn't mean it as a warning, just an offhand comment, but it hit me like a stone. I kept looking at that freezer all night. Each time I walked by, my eyes lingered on the small window, expecting to see the pale face again, staring back. Every so often, I thought I saw shadows flicker, the reflection of someone moving behind me, only to turn and find empty aisles. The hum of the fridges became a background scream, a reminder that I was alone but not alone. Before my shift ended, I went back to the freezer one last time, just to be sure. I pulled open the door slowly, the air biting at my skin. I walked in, my flashlight trembling, shining across the racks of frozen meat and boxes. That's when I saw it. A handprint, fogged and smudged, pressed against the inside of the glass door. Not faint, not a mark from condensation or a stray print from a worker. A clear, distinct handprint, as if someone had been standing there, reaching out. I stepped back, my breath visible in the cold air, and my heart stopped. My mind raced with every ghost story I'd ever heard, every tale of people vanishing in the middle of the night, never to be found. I left the store that morning with the first light creeping over the hills, and I haven't been back since. Sometimes, though, when I drive past that stretch of highway at night, I swear I see someone standing near the lights of the old store. A pale face, dark eyes, motionless, waiting. And sometimes, when I pass by fast enough, I catch a glimpse of frost in the air, swirling like smoke, just for a moment. And I remember the handprint inside the freezer, pressed against the glass, staring at me like it had never left. Even now, I dream about that night. The way the cold pressed in, the way the light flickered, the way I knew without a doubt that someone, or something, had been in that store with me, watching, waiting. My stomach still knots thinking about it. I can't explain it. I don't try anymore. But every night when the world is quiet and dark, I remember that man in the freezer aisle. And sometimes I wonder if he's still there. I used used to work the night shift as a security guard at an old hospital just outside of Charleston, West Virginia. It wasn't the kind of job you took because you wanted it. It was the kind you ended up with after too many bills and not enough choices. The pay wasn't great, but it was quiet, and I told myself I liked quiet. Most nights I made my rounds through the new wings, the parts still full of life and light, and then the older sections, where the paint peeled and the smell of disinfectant clung to the walls like something that didn't want to die. There was one wing, though, that nobody liked going near. The East Wing. It had been closed off for renovations after a fire years back, long before I started. Some old-timers said it had never really reopened because of the damage, but others said it was because people kept getting sick after working there. Headaches, dizziness, memory loss. The kind of things that make you wonder if it's the air or something else. It was quiet there. Too quiet. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful but heavy, like it's holding its breath. The overhead lights buzzed, flickering with a faint pulse that didn't match the rhythm of the rest of the building. When I walked that hallway, my boots echoed like I was the only person alive for miles. The air always smelled faintly of smoke and rusted metal, even though the fire had been decades ago. Around 2 a.m. one night, I started hearing voices. It was subtle at first. A soft, low murmur like someone whispering from a room down the hall. I froze, my flashlight beam landing on the old sign that read, Rooms 310, 316. The sound was coming from somewhere near 313. I told myself it was probably a radio, or maybe sound carrying from another floor. But the longer I stood there, the clearer it became. 2 voices, speaking quietly, slowly, like people talking half asleep. I couldn't make out the words, just the rhythm, one calm, one weak. The sound made the hair on my arms rise. I called out, "Hello? Maintenance?" But no one answered. Room 313 had been sealed off since before I'd been hired. The door had a metal plate bolted across it and yellow tape hanging loose from the knob. But as I got closer, I noticed something. The faintest sliver of light under the door, flickering like candlelight. My throat went dry. The hum of the lights overhead grew louder, and I swear the hallway temperature dropped. I put my hand on the handle. Cold as ice. I shouldn't have opened it. Every instinct told me to walk away, to radio it in, but curiosity and fear have a strange way of twisting together. I pried the door open enough to peer inside. The room was dim, lit only by the weak spill of my flashlight. The air that rushed out hit me like a freezer, dry and heavy, thick with the smell of antiseptic and old smoke. I stepped in, boots, crunching lightly on what I thought was debris, but when I looked down, it was just peeling paint and broken tile. Everything was wrong about that room. The walls had streaks of black near the ceiling, like smoke damage that had never been scrubbed away. The windows were sealed with plastic sheeting that fluttered ever so slightly, though there was no draft. And in the corner, by the remains of a hospital bed, I saw indentations on the floor. Faint outlines where the bed's wheels had been, and smaller marks beside them, like someone had stood there for a long time. Then I heard it again, breathing. Slow, wet, right behind me. I turned so fast my flashlight almost slipped from my hand. Nothing, just the empty doorway, my own shallow breath echoing in the cold air. But the sound didn't stop. It shifted, faint, uneven, as if someone was lying close by, just out of sight. I shined the light across the far wall. For a second, I thought I saw the shape of a person lying on the bed, a figure under a sheet. But when I blinked, the bed was empty. I backed out, slammed the door shut, and stood there in the hallway, chest pounding. The voices had stopped. So had the lights. Every bulb in that corridor flickered and went dead for a few seconds before buzzing back to life. I radioed it in, but the other guard on duty just laughed it off. "You're hearing the pipes," he said. "Old building, man. Plays tricks on you." The next night I avoided that hallway for as long as I could, but during my final rounds, I had to pass by it again. My stomach twisted as I neared room 313. The door was still shut, but something had changed. The yellow tape was gone. The bolt plate hung loose, one screw missing. I didn't open it again. I couldn't. I didn't sleep much after that. My dreams were strange, heavy with the sound of muffled voices. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I'd heard breathing in the corner of my room. 2 weeks later, I quit. No notice. Just left my uniform in the locker and drove away. But sometimes when I drive past that hospital, especially late at night, my radio crackles. It's faint, just a whisper under the static, but I know the rhythm of those voices now. One calm, one weak. Like they're still in there, talking to each other in the dark. Once on a foggy night, I pulled over near the service road that runs alongside the east wing. The hospital loomed against the hills, lights flickering like dying stars. I turned off my engine, and for a few seconds, all I heard was the soft hum of power lines and the distant cry of a night bird. Then, through the stillness, my radio came alive again. Only this time, it wasn't static. It was breathing. Slow, wet, familiar. The same sound that had followed me down that hallway. I shut it off, but the noise kept going. I realized, with a cold sinking in my chest, that it wasn't coming from the radio at all. It was coming from the back seat. I didn't look. I just started the car and drove until the hospital disappeared behind the trees. I didn't stop until I saw the first light of morning creeping over the hills. When I finally looked in the rearview mirror, there was nothing there. Just the empty seat and frost on the inside of the window, shaped like a handprint. I don't work nights anymore. I don't go near hospitals. But sometimes when I'm driving alone through those mountain roads, my radio hums, soft and low. And if I listen too closely, I can hear them still. The voices from room 313, whispering to each other through the static, waiting for me to listen. I took the night shift at a gas station in rural West Virginia, mostly because it was the only job that offered steady hours and a little extra cash. People think working nights in a small town is peaceful. Quiet aisles, a handful of customers, maybe the occasional trucker stopping for gas. And at first it was. The first week I got used to the hum of the fluorescent lights, the occasional beep of the register, and the slow drip of the ice machine. But you don't get used to everything out there. Not really. The station sat right, on the edge of thick woods, the kind where sunlight barely touched the ground, and the trees leaned over the road like they were waiting for you. There were no streetlights past the pumps. At night it was black beyond the circle of fluorescent bulbs, so black it made your eyes ache just trying to see past it. I got used to hearing twigs snapping behind the building. At first I thought it was deer or maybe a raccoon. Nothing to worry about. But the sounds didn't match. They were deliberate, careful, like someone was testing the space, listening to how the shadows moved. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I was checking the security monitors. Nothing unusual, until I caught it. A movement across the lot, something crawling on all fours, low to the ground, between the woods and the edge of the lights. My stomach dropped. I tried to rationalize it. A dog, maybe, but the way it moved wasn't right. Slow, deliberate, almost human in its pacing. It paused just at the edge of the illuminated lot and stayed there, motionless. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked back, it was gone. But the unease had settled deep in my chest. Curiosity, or maybe foolishness, got the better of me. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The air hit me cold, wet, metallic. I couldn't place it at first, rain from earlier mixing with something else, something heavy in the soil. I swept the light across the lot, across the woods. Nothing, just the usual dark, and the sound of my boots crunching on gravel. Then I heard it, a whisper. My name. Just my name, soft and wet, carried from somewhere beyond the lot, from the darkness behind the pumps. I froze. The beam of my flashlight quivered as I spun in a slow circle, heart hammering, calling back into the dark. Who's there? No answer. Just the whisper again, softer this time, closer, but still unreachable. I didn't stay out there long. My hands were shaking as I closed the door behind me. I tried to laugh it off. Nerves, fatigue, Maybe I was imagining things. But the next few nights, the twigs snapping grew more frequent, sharper, closer. Sometimes I thought I could see shapes just past the tree line, moving low, careful, like they knew I was watching. I started locking the side doors that led toward the woods, keeping the pumps in full view. Every so often, the lights overhead flickered like something was testing me. Then came the scratches. I arrived one morning, hungover and exhausted from a double shift, to find the back door caked in deep gouges. Claw marks, long and jagged, running from the bottom of the frame to the handle. Whoever, or whatever, had been there had been trying to get in. The manager shrugged it off, saying maybe some kid had gotten drunk and gotten carried away. But I knew. I had seen those shapes in the darkness, heard the whispering, felt the eyes watching me from the woods, unseen, just beyond the light. I stopped sleeping well. Dreams of crawling figures, of low whispers, of movement just beyond the circle of bulbs, plagued me. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I could hear scraping outside my own house. The sound followed me even after I quit, though I tried to tell myself it was the wind or branches against the siding. But the shape stayed in my head. Even when I closed my eyes during the day, they were there, low, shifting, patient. I don't work nights anymore, not anywhere near those woods, but every time I drive past that stretch of highway, I see it. Movement at the edge of the trees, low to the ground, deliberate. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of a shape pausing at the back of the lot, just outside the reach of the lights. My stomach tightens, my hands go clammy, and I remember the whispering. My name, soft, wet, calling me from the darkness. I try to ignore it, to tell myself I imagined everything. But it's there, waiting, watching, patient. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right through the hills at night, I swear I hear the faint scrape of claws across gravel, coming closer, moving toward the light. I worked nights as a 911 dispatcher in a small Appalachian county. Most of the calls were the kind you expect. Drunks who had fallen down the road, teenagers playing pranks, false alarms from people who thought they smelled smoke or saw shadows moving in the trees. Nights were long, slow, and quiet, filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of the old switchboard. You get used to the monotony after a while, and it lulls you into a sort of calm that's more dangerous than outright fear. One night, around 2 a.m, I answered a call that I'll never forget. The line was quiet at first, then a whisper. Soft, hesitant, trembling just enough that I could feel the tension through the receiver. A woman. She told me someone was in her house. Her voice was shaky, but there was a controlled calm to it, like she was trying not to panic, like she was trained to survive. I stayed on the line asking her questions to keep her talking, to keep her aware, to keep her safe. She said she could hear him breathing behind her bedroom door. That's when my stomach sank. I asked her if she could see him, if he had a weapon, if she could move. She whispered back that she was hiding, too scared to look. Then a sound came over the line. Slow creaking, deliberate, like someone had placed their hand on the door and was turning it open, inch by inch. Her gasp was brief, almost swallowed, and then silence. I tried calling her name, prompting her to respond, but the line stayed open, just the faint hiss of static. I didn't hang up. I couldn't. I could feel the tension in the room I sat in, the lights above flickering slightly as if the building itself was holding its breath. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. It was impossible to tell. Every instinct I had screamed to call the local deputies, but there was no trace of her address on the line. I tried every system, every database, but nothing matched. The line stayed open for 43 minutes. 43 minutes of static, punctuated by low, subtle sounds that made the hairs on my arms rise. Faint knocks, slow dragging noises, the echo of soft breathing. Sometimes it felt like the call was moving with me, twisting through the wires, not just in her house but here, in my small, lonely room. I kept thinking I should hang up, that maybe it was some technical error or a prank, but the fear was real, deep, pressing, and I couldn't. The kind of fear that doesn't scream or shout, but sits in your chest, slowly making you aware that something is very wrong. The line eventually went completely silent, leaving behind only a low, almost imperceptible hum. I stayed at my desk for hours afterward, staring at the phone, listening to the silence that felt anything but empty. The next day, I tried to shake it off. I mentioned it to my supervisor, expecting some understanding, maybe even skepticism, but he just nodded and moved on. No one else seemed to have heard the line the way I had, or felt the creeping dread that had settled on me. But the strangest part came later that afternoon. I was reviewing the call logs for the night before, standard procedure, when I saw a number I recognized immediately, mine, my personal cell. Timestamp matched the exact moment of the call. The line hadn't just connected to her. Somehow it had looped back, traced its way to me, carrying the same breathless, static-laced sound. I tried to rationalize it, crossed lines, a technical glitch, something in the old system of wires and switches that still ran through the building like veins, but I knew better. I felt it in my bones, in the lingering tension that followed me home. Even when I left the station, the sound followed. Static and low hums crept from old radios, the TV when no one was watching, the occasional phone call that came from nowhere. Nights became impossible. I could barely sleep, hearing faint creaks and whispers in the darkness, convinced they came from behind my bedroom door. Every shadow seemed alive, every wind gust through the trees outside sounding like slow, deliberate breathing. Friends noticed I was jumpy, but I couldn't explain it, and I never tried to reach out to anyone in the department again. Sometimes I drive past the county building where I worked that night. The windows glow faintly, and the dark Appalachian hills press in around it like a wall. And sometimes, if I'm quiet, if I'm driving slow enough, the faint hum comes through my car radio. Static at first, soft, but underneath I swear I hear it, the whispering, my name. And then the slow, deliberate creak like a door opening somewhere deep in the dark. I don't stop. I can't. I drive past and keep moving. But I can still feel it, the line that never ended, stretching out somewhere beyond the wires, beyond the town, waiting. Even now, years later, I can hear it if I close my eyes too long, if I'm alone in the dark. The low, wet breath, the whispering, and the unbearable sense that something is just on the other side, listening, waiting. It doesn't matter where I go or what I do. That night left a mark, and the call never really ended.